I think you don't have to jump in all the way, like all in right away. You can kind of like get your feet wet, as I guess the saying goes. So you can still be doing whatever you're doing, and then just trying slowly. You're trying things. Fitness wise, people that don't work out, or let's say are overweight or not happy with their self image or their body, they don't have to go like all out. 2 3 hours in the gym. All right, start with you go to the store. Let's park as far as you can, and have that as an extra few minutes of walking, or go outside your office or your house and walk a few days. Get the lightest weights. Start kind of getting some kind of muscle memory and resistance in that sense. So starting from something is better than not doing anything at all, regardless of how small that starter changes.
That is Roman Prokopchuk this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the Do It For Yourself podcast. My name is Ian and I am the host here of the Do It For Yourself podcast and the creator, the quote-unquote mastermind behind Do It For Yourself. And each week I have the opportunity to sit down with someone who is doing it for themselves. And this is often someone who's building a business, someone who's on a fitness journey. But it does not have to be limited to those two things. I've been trying to expand my horizons on people who are doing it for themselves and line up some new and exciting guests for you here on the podcast. My guest this week, Roman Prokopchuk, is an entrepreneur who is here in the United States, but he actually immigrated here from a communist country at the time when he left. And he moved here into New Jersey from a distant relative sponsoring them. And he came over, and we really get a chance to dive into Roman's story of going through school and going through a challenging time as a young person here in the United States, not speaking the language, and really growing into the person who he is today, and growing his businesses, and growing just as a person, really. And I got connected with Roman because he had a very interesting story through his immigration and actually went on to work for the Secret Service for a very short period of time. And so I really wanted to dive deeper into Roman's story, and we do just that on the podcast today. So I'm really looking forward to bringing you this interview. And without further ado, here is Roman.
Cool. All right. Well, Roman, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on to the podcast this afternoon. And I want to say thank you so much for just being so open to this. I mean, I don't know who started the thread in the Facebook group that we are both a part of, Podcast Movement. I think it's like Podcast Movement, a group for podcasters or something very generic like that. But it's somebody started a thread essentially, and it's like, hey, this is a great spot for people to network. If you are looking for guests or if you want to be a guest, network in the comments below and go ahead and set some things up. So I think you had posted a comment on there and it detailed kind of a few like bullet points from your story. And I was like, man, this seems like an incredible story. I got to get in touch with Roman. So I added you as a friend. We got connected on Messenger, and it was like, boom, you signed up for an open slot this weekend. So thanks so much for being like super on top of scheduling and everything. I'm sure, as you're well aware as a podcaster yourself, scheduling sometimes can be super difficult. And you can never count on having a podcast until you are literally sitting down with that person, because I've had people cancel up until 5 minutes beforehand. Sometimes I'm like sitting around waiting and it's 15 minutes past.
Yeah, my pleasure. I try to stay on top of things, and I've had the same experience where I think maybe 40% of my bookings have either canceled or not shown up or not followed up. So I try to be as, courteous as possible because I've been on the other end.
Yeah, I do appreciate that so much. So I want to, as we were just talking in the pre-show a little bit, obviously we're going to take a deep dive into your story and how you are doing it for yourself. But before we get into we're going to kind of do it backwards. Before we get into how you got to where you are, why don't you tell us where you are? What are you up to? What are you doing right now?
So I founded a digital marketing agency in 2012 called Novazor Digital. So I basically run that. I also work directly for a client called Cubic Consulting, running their internal digital marketing efforts. And I've started this podcast, Digital Savage Experience, in December of 2017. So about a year and a half on podcasting. And since June, me and my wife have been foster parents. So we basically have that to keep our hands full.
That's really, really awesome. The foster, obviously, being a parent in general is probably a very rewarding experience. I don't know as of yet for myself, but I can only imagine how amazing it is to be a foster parent, and what that's like. So congratulations to both of you in taking on that journey. And so can you just explain for the listeners a little bit what your day-to-day looks like and what you are doing for your clients?
Day to day, a lot of follow up with vendors, talking with representatives from companies like Google, LinkedIn, Bing about accounts, about different spends from the paid search side, checking on analytics, looking at dashboards. There's all-in-one dashboard set up for every client because you need to see everything going on in a campaign, and having it in a centralized place really helps. So you see all the moving parts and you can identify pain points or things that you may need to tweak a lot faster. Communication, delegation of work, checking on work. So basically kind of the gambit of tactical and management and, people focused.
And so the data that you're looking at is data from what? What exactly is your company doing as a whole for these clients?
So basically digital marketing, kind of the gambit of digital marketing. So that includes search engine optimization, paid search, paid social, organic social, content creation, and some other stuff as well. So you see metrics coming from Facebook, how many people are interacting with posts and things of that nature, paid campaigns from Google search when you see ads, tracking organic keywords and the traffic that's bringing in. So just analyzing a lot of data points.
Okay, very good. Yep. I just wanted to kind of give everybody an idea of what your company is doing for these clients. So the first portion of your story that I want to cover before we get into kind of how you built these businesses is that you came over to the States as an immigrant, and you came over at a very young age, and I believe you had come over with 6 other people. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about that. You were coming from a then communist country over into the U.S. And so what was that journey like? What was the first step even in getting out of that communist country and making your way over here to the United States like?
So I came here in 1990. That's when kind of immigration opened up a little bit. And basically the process was you needed a sponsor to come over. So a family member, somebody that basically vouched for you and took responsibility for you for the first few months in terms of if something happened financially, medically, that kind of thing. So the reason we were leaving, obviously, the state of the country, because people joke about, oh yeah, how hard or not hard it was, but the accounts of people stand in line for 4 or 5 hours for a loaf of bread, that's not inaccurate. I mean, I remember doing that with my mom, like different food shortages, water being cut off, that kind of stuff. And we went to church, so my faith is important to me, and obviously religion didn't exist in a communist structure. So if you went to church, so you had the KGB follow you around for some other stuff in terms of like religious persecution. You were sent to Siberia for a period of time on trumped up charges. My mom was supposed to be valedictorian when she graduated, but the government knew obviously she attended church and she believed in God, so they basically stripped her of that. So basically a lot of discrimination regarding of what religion you practice, but as long as you went to church and you had some kind of faith and put that over kind of the communist regime, you would be followed, tailed, that kind of stuff, and persecuted. So when the opportunity arose, we got this sponsorship and we basically left everything. And when leaving, you basically are stripped of everything. So the United States knew we were coming, but the Soviet Union basically said, you're leaving, you're not coming back. So they stripped us of the citizenship and we could only take what we could carry. So we could only take a certain amount of money and anything else that, in our suitcases, and everything else was left behind. And it was kind of this, I guess, underground railroad of immigration where coming from Eastern Europe, you would have to stop in Vienna, Austria. So we did that. Then we stopped in Rome, Italy, and then we finally came over. I was originally supposed to go to San Mateo in California, but I ended up on the East Coast with distant relatives, and I've been in New Jersey ever since.
And so, when you were getting ready to start this journey to come over here, how old were you at the time? And just the journey itself to get to the United States, what was that journey like? Was there, a very, very high stress level? I know that you said the Soviets knew that you were leaving, so it probably wasn't quite as bad as, sneaking out of a country that wasn't necessarily going to let you out. But were the conditions still not the best as well?
I mean, I was four turning five, so obviously the perspective's a little different. If you probably would ask my, parents or
Mm-hmm.
grandparents, they would have a different story. But I know Gorbachev, the president at the time, did the whole like perestroika and started kind of unwinding the grips of communism, and Ukraine got its independence in 1992. So I guess maybe there was still kind of like a uneasiness about like not being let out, like getting to the border and they say, you can't leave. But other than that, I just remember the trip itself. So, buses, trains, planes, and not, understanding languages like in Austria or Italy, and then getting here and learning English and not knowing English for, the first few months.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask you is, what language is your native language that you were speaking all the way on your way over here, and how many countries did you or other areas did you go through where you did not know their language, on top of then obviously getting here to the States?
So I speak Ukrainian. I mean, a lot of people in Eastern Ukraine speak Russian and Ukrainian. I understand Russian based on it being a kind of a Cyrillic language and based on off of a Cyrillic alphabet. But I spoke Ukrainian. I still speak Ukrainian. When we stopped in Austria, I guess they speak German or, a variation of, and then in Rome, Italian. So my mom can speak German, so she was fine there. Obviously, I didn't understand anything because I was with my parents the whole time and
Mm-hmm.
grandparents and my aunt. And Italian, it was just the same situation where obviously I didn't speak Italian, but I would be around my family that would communicate with me.
And so it was you and who else? I know you said your grandparents are there, your mom was there. Who what was the family that came with you?
My brother that was born in May 1989, so he was just a couple of months in the whole
Wow.
journey.
Wow.
My mother, my father, my grandmother, and my grandfather on my mother's side, and then my aunt, my mother's sister.
And who was the sponsor that sponsored you over here? Because you said that it had to be a family member, right? So somebody was already here.
Yeah, it was a distant family member. They were originally from South America because there's this weird immigration stuff after World War II. A lot of people from Ukraine immigrated to Paraguay and Argentina and countries like that. So it was someone that was in Paraguay, then moved here years back, and they ended up being like distant relatives, and they lived in New Jersey. So they basically pretty much vouched for us.
Okay. And so now I want to get into kind of your journey of starting your school here and what that was like, what it was like to come into a brand new school. You didn't know anyone. And on top of that, you did not speak the language when you got here. So what was that like, kind of you just got your feet on the ground in New Jersey, and not only do you have to learn, everything about this new place that you just got to, but you don't speak the language either.
So the town that I moved to, there was a lot of immigrants from Ukraine, which was convenient, and the church that I ended up going to was a Ukrainian church. So there was a lot of kids in the town that went to the church that were Ukrainian and kind of, I guess, took me under their wing in a way. So it translated when need be in school and that kind of stuff. And I basically went right into kindergarten and started learning English. And then I moved after a year to a different town because when we moved here, we stayed with our sponsor for about a few weeks, and then basically we were left to fend for ourselves. So we had to get a two-bedroom apartment for everyone. And then a couple months down the road, we got a little, I guess, cushion that my mom and my dad could get basically our own place. So we did that and moved to the town right next to where we came to. And there I went to school to first grade. So in first and second grade, basically I was an ESL, which is English second language, and basically learned the language. I had an additional kind of class. They didn't have a English second language class to accommodate in the elementary school I was in. So they basically had to bus me to this other elementary school in the town just for this one class and then bus me back and forth, which was like a little intrusive in terms of like my education because it would disrupt my day.
Mm-hmm.
But I pretty much learned English in a year. I mean, I had a slight accent at this point. I don't think I have much of an accent.
No,
Sometimes people
no.
say I do it, but yeah, I mean, learning a language at such a young age, your brain gets programmed to the point where it's somewhat more of a native,
Uh-huh.
speaker, and you basically have the accent drop off.
But you can still speak in your native language as well. And now, so I've had a few friends who they are from. I've had friends from Germany. I've had friends from the UK. I've had friends from Japan. And so when you speak, do you get your accent and kind of like your um I don't know what the right word is to use for it. Um, but like, does it come right back to you, and as soon as you start to speak, like to your parents or your grandparents?
Yeah, I mean, it's still there. I still like you said, I speak to my grandmother in Ukrainian. My mom, when she calls, she speaks Ukrainian. If I'm working or something, I try to listen to like news in Ukrainian or watch some kind of, YouTube thing in terms of something inspirational or something related to Ukraine and Ukrainian, but I can read it, I can write it still, and I speak it without an accent because obviously when I said my brother came here when he was a baby, so he learned how to speak Ukrainian in America. So he has an American accent when he speaks Ukrainian. We went over to Ukraine one time and the people were like, "Where are you from? Canada, the United States?" Where I don't really get that when I'm over there.
Interesting, interesting. That's pretty funny. So, and like, so you learned even, I mean, you weren't that old when you started this whole process and coming over here, so I'm sure you still had to develop your vocabulary, once you got into first, second grade, but you didn't have an accent even with the limited vocabulary
No.
at such a young age.
Yeah, and my mom at home, we would only speak Ukrainian, so that would kind of keep the language like pure in that sense, and I wouldn't mix it
Mm-hmm.
or like get, caught up. So if I didn't know a word like a bigger word in terms of syllables that was past kind of my grade level in Ukrainian, she would tell me what it is. She would explain what it is. She taught me how to read. I had a bunch of like phonics books in Ukrainian. And then, I mean, she learned how to speak English along with me. Obviously, she still has an accent
Mm-hmm.
because when you learn English or another language past a certain age, your brain is already programmed from that language learning ability. So you retain an accent regardless how long you know the language at that point. But we both learned English at the same time. I remember, she helping me with my homework and stuff like that. So, I mean, both ways, she still kept teaching me Ukrainian and teaching me how to read in Ukrainian and write, basically homeschooling me in a sense in Ukrainian, and then I going to school and learning English and everything in terms of the English language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome though that she kept up with that, and it's awesome now. I'm sure it's great that you can have that conversation with her, and you keep up with it on your own too. I think that's really big. There's a lot of people who don't keep up with it on their own, and they don't practice it, and so they start to lose it, even more.
Yeah, it's important to me. Obviously, it's part of me. It's part of my heritage. It depends on the person. Some people like, say they don't need it, but I think the more languages that it really helps you in your travels and connecting with people and even networking. Sometimes on places people are like talking Ukrainian. It's funny because they're saying stuff that they think people don't understand, and you're kind of
Mm-hmm.
like undercover. People are saying like the craziest stuff because they think no one understands.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I wish that I had another language kind of under my belt like that as well. But there's so many, it's so hard to pick like which one would be great to have in your pocket. But I want to kind of transition to after you have learned English, and now we're talking about going on to your middle school, high school, and on through there, and figuring out kind of what you were going to do. And so, did you, once you were getting into that later high school age, did you have a plan of something that you wanted to do, and you knew like 100% this is what I want to go on and do?
I think I wanted to play sports. Honestly, I'm fairly athletic, like one of those people that like picks up a ball and is fairly decent in whatever sport it is. So I played baseball, basketball, soccer, football. I did track. Um, Up until 10th grade, I went to a public high school, and then I transferred to a private Christian school that I basically got scouted for soccer, for some D2 and D3 schools, and then other stuff. But I didn't even know I wanted to do criminal justice in college, honestly. It was just one of those things where it was, you need to go to college. You're going to be the first of our family to go to college in the United States, one of those kind of like immigrant wishes, I guess, parent wish that, you go to secondary school and college or university in the United States. So I don't know if they wanted me to do something like law or medicine that a lot of parents want their kids to do, especially immigrant parents. But at first, as a freshman, when I got into college, I was, I guess, undeclared. And then it was pre-business. And then for some reason, I don't know what led me to criminal justice, but I just kind of ran with it.
And so with your criminal justice, did you know what you wanted to do with that, or were you kind of just more focused on, okay, my parents want me to go to college. This seems like it's kind of interesting. I'm just going to go with this and kind of see where the road takes me, so to speak.
Kind of see where the road is. I mean, learning about like the different departments and stuff, I guess eventually become like a detective or something in forensics. because I'm good with like piecing puzzles or different facts together to come to a conclusion. But it wasn't like, I'm set to go into the FBI and that's my goal. It was just one of those things where, it seemed and it interested me at the time. And then, being 20, 25 years and being able to retire with a pension and then maybe doing something else appealed to me at the time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that would appeal to a lot of people if they could, get through the background checks and everything else in order to go into that one of those branches that has the benefits like that. But when going through college, what was the education like as far as compared to your middle school and high school days and those days where you were learning English and English was your second language? Would you, I don't want to say, I don't want you to like say that you're replacing Ukrainian with English, but do you consider it your second language, or do you consider them to be equal essentially at this point in your life, and you are speaking and writing and communicating in English, fairly comfortably?
I think English is stronger just because I'm surrounded by English, but I don't know if you ever spoken to anybody else about like how they think.
Mm-hmm.
I can switch over the language that I think in, which is, I don't know. I've spoken to other people that speak several languages and they can kind of do the same thing. So I could be speaking to you right now in Ukrainian and thinking what I'm going to say. I mean, speaking to you in English, sorry, and thinking what I'm going to, say in Ukrainian and then saying it out loud in English. So I can like, I don't know, the languages are kind of like spliced in my head. Sometimes when I speak to my mom, half of the sentence is in Ukrainian and the other is in English. So it's like a broken slang between the two languages. But I think going to college, I went to Rutgers University in New Jersey, the State
Yep.
University of New Jersey, but I actually commuted from East Brunswick to Newark, Rutgers Newark, which was a commuter campus mainly. And that campus is one of the most diverse campuses in terms of ethnicities in the country. So there were a lot of people that were exchange students. English was their second language. They had accents. So I was put in a situation where my English was strong at that time, but there's people that, spoke English not as well, and I could relate to them and I knew where they were coming from. So I understood and, try to help them through that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If you kind of like took them under your wing and helped them through, because it was something that you were kind of in, and you were in their shoes before. And I would say probably at the college level, there's definitely more people like that who are willing to help, as opposed to people at the elementary school or even middle school level. They're quicker to poke fun rather than reach out a hand and say, hey, here, come over here. I can help you with this. I can show you how to go about this.
Yeah, I think so. And I think people are more understanding in college. I guess, more tolerant, and you are older and I guess more mature and starting to mature. So you have a lot more empathy than someone in middle school or high school
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
other than that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes I feel like those middle schoolers and down around that age group, they haven't developed that empathy yet. They don't even really know what that word means.
Yeah, I think back then, I've experienced, I guess, bullying. I don't think it's affected me at all at this point. It wasn't like traumatic, but people in elementary school made fun of my accent or whatever. And obviously, coming here with nothing, you have to build it up. So, first, second, third grade, money was tight. So, I
Mm-hmm.
had like hand-me-down clothes and, stuff from like, really cheap stores or like Salvation Army or like Goodwill. People would make fun of that. But it's one of those things like kids are, mean. A lot of kids are mean. They say what's kind of on their mind. They're little rude. And it's what they're being taught at home also. If their parents aren't necessarily tolerant or don't understand or like relate to, an immigrant story or, feel like, immigrants are coming and take their jobs or whatever, then, they may teach a certain amount of like bias.
And so you just mentioned it there. When you come over here as an immigrant, you have to kind of build it up, and you have to start to like, start to put some money away, and basically you're starting from zero because there wasn't such a limited amount that you could bring with you. So did you learn some of these habits and some of these tactics for building things back up at a young age from watching your parents and your grandparents?
I think so, and it's like coming from that environment. There's a lot of startups and founders that come from that Eastern European region. So some of the biggest companies, co-founders of Google, other companies, really, Fortune 500 companies, big, startup unicorns coming from Ukraine, Poland, some parts of Russia, and things of that nature. So I think I appreciate things a lot more. I have to kind of put myself in check because there's a lot of first world problems, and knowing that they're not as important when, some of the things other people are concerned in the world are when they're going to get their next meal or a loaf of bread or, getting sick from not having clean water, that kind of thing. But my grandfather already retired before we came over. So he worked for like a furniture manufacturer. He's basically a carpenter, and he was already retired. So when he came here, he had to basically unretire, and he didn't get an easy job. He became a roofer, and he did that into his 70s, 6 days a week from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then go to church on Sunday and then do it all over again. Do it in the winter in 100, 10, 20-degree weather in the summer when the shingles, the tar is melting. So he had no, leg hair or arm hair at that point because it got singed off. There's people coming in their 20s to make some money and go back, and they basically would last a few weeks. He basically did it for, 20 additional years, almost another career or a lifetime of pretty much hard labor, and just to support his family and be there. So I mean, I really appreciated him for that. He actually ended up passing away end of this February. He had a stroke, so I was in the hospital with him for about 10 days. So he was, a big figure in terms of a male role model for me, and what it was to work hard and be there and provide.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to hear about his passing. But so when you are, you're in college, then you are watching your grandfather go through kind of basically, like you just said, this entire second career. Did that instill some values in you to not take advantage of this opportunity that you have in front of you to go to college and do well to pursue something, after college?
It did, but I think colleges don't do a good job of like setting kids on track freshman year, first semester. They
100%.
basically say, you're not in high school anymore. We're not going to baby you, but it's not necessarily babying if you put somebody or mentor them on a successful track. So obviously, I got into college first semester. I failed the math class I had, and I had to work 3.5 years to get that back up to like a 3.5, 3.6 with straight A's basically. So going out and not being focused the first semester and failing a class led me to like, let me actually not squander this opportunity. I basically took my studies seriously and got straight A's past that. But I mean, I could have avoided it. I was still obviously looking at the work ethic of my grandfather, but it was, the immaturity of an 18, 19-year-old and wanting to hang out and make friends and being in this new independent environment kind of, caught up to me. And I think it does with a lot of kids. I think there's, a staggering percentage of the kids that end up failing out because of grades their first year of college.
And when you were going through, was there anything that really piqued your interest as you were going through college then? Because when you made the decision to go to college, you were kind of like, I'm just gonna go with this, criminal justice. This sounds great. It's definitely something that I'm interested in. Was there anything along the way that really like lit a spark for you, and you were like, that's it?
I think one of the most favorite classes I had was white collar crime. So you see all
Mm.
kind of the abuses in different parts of society. Some things like Walmart had a policy. I don't know if they still have it. So there, if you've ever been to Walmart, they have a lot of senior door greeters and other employees that are semi-retired or already retired but just do it for some extra money. There was a policy where it was a legal loophole that they were able to take out life insurance policies on those employees. So basically when they passed, Walmart got paid for them passing, which I thought was pretty shady. And then just a lot of different business dealings, how companies push other companies out or get them to do stuff, different health issues of different chemical manufacturers in the country, how they hit things and dump different chemicals that have caused like cancer and other things in
Mm-hmm.
communities, stuff like the Tuskegee experiments, and just like a whole plethora of abuses throughout society. And it really interested me, so I wanted to kind of, regardless of what I was going to do, kind of give back or help out. So I think that solidified it and kept me on track within pursuing criminal justice.
And as you're getting through this, you get an opportunity that I think is probably, I think you would agree that it was probably an opportunity of a lifetime. You get the chance to go and intern with the Secret Service. So tell me a little bit about what it was like to be an intern at the Secret Service. And I guess I don't know if you have to be careful about some of the things that you share, but I would definitely love for you to share as much as you can about that little journey or point in your life.
So I applied for it. I think they like people with different language backgrounds as well, and coming from different
I'm sure they do.
cultural backgrounds. So just for the internship, the background check was about 6 months, and I had to, my own investigator assigned where he went through and had to go to my pastor and check like the character of me, go to close friends and how I've been in the last, 10 years, 15 years, long-term friends, looking at obviously if I had a criminal background, looking at my previous employment, checking to employers even in high school how I was, and just being very thorough, asking random questions like have I ever been in any terrorist organizations, paramilitary groups, stuff like that. And when I passed it, I basically was assigned to the counterfeit currency squad. So the Secret Service actually has two duties, which is a protective duty for the president, other members of the government, and foreign dignitaries when they visit. And the second fold is working with the Department of Treasury for counterfeit currency. So investigating, large scale and small scale, counterfeit issues. So I would be the person getting all the mail, which is funny. They had the interns screen the mail that came in for explosives, which is kind of they're like the fodder in a way.
Yeah.
So you put it in basically an X-ray machine. You make sure there's no kind of explosives, different foreign objects or substances. And people, stores, businesses, corporations get these intake forms, which when they get bills and they think it's counterfeit, they fill it out, they attach the counterfeit currencies and send it into their local office. So there's, an area assigned. In New Jersey, they were in Newark, the New Jersey field office. There was one in Newark and one in Morristown, New Jersey. That's where I was kind of stationed. And basically, I would go through it every day and intake it, document it, give it a serial number, and then pass it off. And all the evidence was stored. And at the end of the year, if nothing was resolved or if it already passed all that counterfeit currency got destroyed at the end of the year. So I did that. I ended up going on one protective duty for one of George W. Bush's daughters on her book tour. That's basically the time that I was doing the internship. It was the last year of Bush's presidency. And then they also took the interns out to the firing squad, which was very trusting of everyone. We got to shoot all the guns they use in the field and stuff. So some machine guns, their handguns, their shotguns, which was a cool experience as well.
And so, even just talking about this right now, it seems that this was an experience that you really, really enjoyed. And when you were looking at it back at that time, you were looking at it as, it could be something that was potentially really good for you. And, you could get in and put in your time, 25 years, and then you'd have a great pension. You could go off and do something else. But what really flipped the switch for you when it was time to start lining up your career after this internship?
Well, it's very political. So if you're in a field office and the director of that office doesn't like you, for the next assignment, they can send you to like Fargo or Anchorage, Alaska, which I think Fargo has like 2 agents assigned to the office. So and you can't get, reassigned. So you have to stay there for like 2-3 years. So one of the things that didn't appeal to me in that government agency structure was having to take a post every few years. So if I wanted a family, I would have to keep moving and moving with my family. And if I had kids, they would be kind of uprooted, and that would affect kind of their upbringing and the childhood experiences they had. And also, basically, the pay is on a government structure. So you're not necessarily rewarded for going above and beyond, or, if you do very great work, the reward could be exponential, where other industries, or even if you work for yourself. So I saw that, and after that internship, that I graduated right away, and in 2008 the economy tanked. So basically I applied to state, local, and federal agencies, and nobody was hiring. There was a hiring freeze based on the money dried up. The government had all these things going on. So I was kind of down and depressed for a while. I think going to the gym and lifting and running and just, physical fitness kept me sane. And I saw a friend at the gym. I would be in the gym every day, and he would see me. He's like, "Have you found a job yet?" I said, "No." And I guess he felt, sorry for me, and he knew I was, an intelligent person. So he said, "I need somebody for my company to start up, digital marketing. We have no one. So here's this packet. I need somebody to do search engine optimization, and take a month or two, go through it, follow it up with a lot of internet resources, and then just get started." And I kind of got my pivot and start in that, and I've ran with it ever since.
So you said there that this was, that was a dark time for you before you had seen this friend at the gym. Were there any very specific moments that you can recall during this time that were really dark, and you were kind of left like, waving your white flag or throwing your hands up in the air like, what the hell am I going to do? I can't get a job. There is nothing out there, and everyone's on a hiring freeze.
Well, it is depressing. I think the economy now, there's a lot of kids that graduate that have a false safety net, thinking that, they're set right after college, but they didn't really do a lot to plan, or didn't make the connections, or didn't take advantage of the networking opportunities or what college had to offer in terms of building a strong network around you and, finding mentors and that kind of stuff. So I was down. I really didn't think I would find anything, and I was just kind of like rotting away and thinking like, why did I go to college for 4 years? Like, I could have done something else for 4 years and been a lot further off. But I kind of just had to recalibrate every day, or I would just lose my mind. I feel there's a lot of people like that out there. I think there's a lot of majors that don't necessarily need to be majors in school, that can be electives, or you can get some kind of certification in them, and it still holds true, because there's a lot of majors that a bachelor's degree simply doesn't hold true, and then you either need a master's or a doctorate in the field, Or I mean, the pickings are kind of slim. So I think if you're looking at a career, you should be passionate about it. You should figure out what you're good at and explore that and build on that. And also look at the kind of lifestyle you want to live. So if you eventually want to become a millionaire, which I mean, everybody wants some form of success and, living a comfortable life. But if you're doing a major where, right off the bat, you're going to be paid, let's say $40,000 and your cap is at 70, well, that may not necessarily be the right path for what you have aligned in terms of like how you want to live your life. So finding something that you're happy and content and good at and that aligns with like your, 1 year, 5 year, 10-year goal.
And what do you think led to having this self-awareness for you to not let the depression kind of like get out of hand and recalibrating, and where did that come from for you? Did you just have it naturally and you knew that like you couldn't let this get out of control kind of because of this, like I've heard it called the immigrant gene before, where people, they don't want to take advantage of the opportunity that they have in front of them. So you knew that you weren't going to let this get out of control, and you weren't going to sit there down in the dumps. You were always just going to do something. Or was there someone who was motivating you to kind of keep plugging away at it?
I mean, I guess my close family, so like my mom, my grandfather, my grandmother would encourage me, like, you'll find something, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it was one of those things where like you don't have a choice. You either learn from the situation and take all that and harness it in a positive way, or just let it just, completely destroy you. And it completely destroying me wasn't an option. So I think it is to a certain extent, thinking back where you came from and the kind of hardships you've dealt with, and if you can overcome that, you can overcome this. And I think it was a little bit of that, and just one of those things where eventually any setback can get recalibrated or turned into something positive.
And so you go through this research and you start looking at some of this stuff for your friend. Was this like hieroglyphics for you? Did you not have any idea what you were looking at when you started to do this?
Well, I started reading and it started making sense.
Okay.
Marketing and just dealing with people and how to, entice people to buy your product or get them to act in the way you want them to act was something like I was kind of interested in over time, or communication. And there's a large part of like psychology and sociology that goes into marketing as well.
Absolutely.
So a little bit of that. And I mean, some of the concepts were foreign. Like a lot of, I wasn't big into code. You need to know for like, let's say search engine optimization, you need to know a little bit of HTML and CSS and that kind of stuff, at least just a beginner's level of code. So learning code and, computer language and that kind of stuff. And then just the jargon and, how things connected or intersected, and then building in terms of strategy, what worked and what didn't work.
And so how long did you end up helping out this friend before you went and branched off onto your own and wanted to then start something for yourself and your own, company?
Well, at the time, it was only for 2 months. And out of that, this other company called LexisNexis hired me, and I was there for several years.
Okay.
But what led to it is my friend didn't have the funds to pay me, so I had to look for something else. So the money that he was going to pay me, his cat ended up getting cancer, and he dropped like 20K out of pocket to pay for this cat.
Whoa.
And then he's like, "Oh, my cat got cancer, and yeah, I don't have any money to pay you." So that kind of sucked. And then I had to pivot from that. So, I put my resume out there, and somebody was interested, and I took it from there.
That's interesting. Actually, it's funny because that's the second time that I'm talking with someone and they mentioned this company, LexisNexis, and I had never heard of it before, but now it has come up again for a second time. So that's interesting. And so while you were at LexisNexis,
were you kind of daydreaming of not having a boss and, not working quote unquote for the man and going back to starting something for yourself again?
So basically, the role I was in, I started there as a SEO, search engine optimization analyst, and
Mm-hmm.
I was there for about 3.5 years, and I ended up leaving as a senior social media and search engine optimization specialist. So to begin with, it was a role where we did marketing for small, medium, and large size law firms across the United States. And the structure of it, it was like a digital marketing agency within a large corporation. So our department was probably medium age, younger, probably by like 15 years. So all the kids were like out of college. Everybody was like, between 23 and like 28, and was hungry and determined, and it was a large team, so people started going to different other agencies in the city, starting their own businesses, starting e-commerce businesses, starting agencies. And it was one of those things where, okay, where, well, all these people are doing it, some at some points have greater knowledge, and I'm not any less smart than these people, so why can't I do it? And then it was just overcoming the fear of doing it, and then just buying a domain, building a website, formally starting an LLC, getting my first client. And the first few years or whatever, I had to pivot into it, so I had a remote team, but still had to do something during the day to pay the bills, so basically double working.
And were you doing all of this, like all that setup that you just talked about? Like, so you're doing this on the weekends, you're doing this on the side, this is your side hustle, so to speak.
Yep, weekends, nights. If I had to take a PTO day and go, to a client or close a client for myself, that kind of stuff. So using my personal days,
Mm-hmm.
using, any other time that I had incurred that I can use, weekends, before work, after work, and then also really networking. Because regardless of what you do, like obviously we met and set up this opportunity through a Facebook group,
Mm-hmm.
basically a support group for podcasters. And if you network in person, network in a group, obviously Facebook is great. Sites like meetup.com, it's really important to find other people around you, people with the same goals, looking to do the same things, to motivate you and inspire you. Because if you're surrounded by hungry people, you're naturally, even if you're a little timid about going and taking that first step of doing whatever you want to do, like they'll push you to do that.
That's awesome. I really like that a lot. I really like that a lot. And so, when did you get to the point with this company where you knew that you were going to be able to leave LexisNexis and you felt comfortable? Was there a number of clients you needed to be working with? Was there a money number that you knew you needed in order to leave LexisNexis, or did it kind of just fall into place for you and it was just the right time?
It was the right time, but even though I left there, I still joined another agency for a brief period of time because my wife ended up, well, my girlfriend at the time, she got a role in Georgia. So she was in Georgia for 10 months. So we ended up doing kind of a long distance thing, and I would be going up and down there. So I needed something still flexible enough to cover it. And, if I had clients in New Jersey, I would still be going back, but I didn't have a central location yet. So I wasn't in Georgia yet, and I wasn't full time in New Jersey. So I had to kind of pivot still
Mm-hmm.
in limbo for a little bit.
And then, so after the limbo, it was just a matter of you knew what was happening. Like your girlfriend at the time knew she was gonna. Did she end up coming back to New Jersey?
Well, I proposed, and she got another role up here. She came back up here, so that was more solidified.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. So it kind of everything up here in New Jersey got solidified. So at that point, you knew you were then able to leave that job and go into this company that you started full time. Boom, just go for it.
Yeah, and learning that what I can do and how I can structure the company. So at first, thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna have this, Madison Avenue like brick and mortar agency, like you see shows like Mad Men, like the traditional advertisers, that kind of stuff. But then I saw like in 2010, 2015, and it's almost 2020, a more remote company structure is, ideal for certain situations. So majority of the times I'm fully remote other than, having conferences on site and that kind of thing. But having team members, majority of which are fully remote and trustworthy at this time, and a structure where the team member or there's people that have a allotted amount of work they can take on, and just activating those people when need be or when a new project comes along, it saves a lot of time. Where I've been at, companies where, they'll get a client. It's more so prevalent in pharmaceutical industry. It's very big accounts. So a company gets, let's say, $100 million account. They have to hire a team for that. They'll hire, let's say, 30, 40 people. Well, the retention rate for accounts is low. You have to know somebody at a pharmaceutical company that's like a connection that like kind of hooked you up, but you have to go through a proposal process and bid on work, be approved as a approved vendor by the pharmaceutical company. And a lot of the times after a year, 2 years, they'll reevaluate you versus competitors anyway.
And it's
So
cutthroat too. I mean, it's cutthroat.
The leadership will swap out, and that leadership has like, buddies and friends that connections that do marketing, and they want to connect you. So sometimes, you lose an account, they don't repurpose the internal team. They'll lay off the whole team. So I didn't want to be in that situation or do that to people. So, I mean, I have a network of people that do other things as well, and they'll have an allotment of 20, 30, 40 hours and basically just block out their time, what I need, and take it from there in a fully remote capacity. And obviously, grade their work and, keep a file in terms of the quality of work they deliver and what they can basically their output. And it's a fairly streamlined process.
And so, being as you started this all around that 2008 time, and when things were, really, really getting tough, what do you think are the top 1 to maybe 3 things that you had to overcome when it came to building this business to become as successful as it has?
I think finding clients, which is always tough. Like sales is cutthroat. It's not easy to close a client or convince someone to pay you a large amount of money for something versus what they're already getting or what they understand of what you can provide. So selling and gaining a client base and basically telling a story that convinces someone to go with you over your competitors. I think just fear along the way. So fear of scaling, fear of starting to begin with, just fears in general. And I think it's evident, and there's a lot of quotes about it. A lot of people speak about it, and I've seen your greatest growth comes in stormy times. So you are naturally going to be fearful, but you can't have courage without fear either. So there's nobody that can be a hero or courageous if that fearful opportunity never came around. So kind of taking that first step into whatever you want to do, and then taking the other, hard decisions. So scaling, hiring, firing, different relationships with vendors, relationships with clients, things going wrong, and basically the ability to pivot also. So you may have a plan, and that's all well and good, everybody should, but being able to deviate away from it and pivot away as fast as possible, it leaves you to be successful than if you would dwell on it and try to kind of ride it out to its death, if you will.
And so I want to be, very respectful of your time that you've already given me. You've given me quite a bit. I just want to I have two questions left for you, if that's okay.
Sure.
And so my first one is, now that you have had success, especially with your business here, what keeps you motivated to continue pushing the needle forward, or pushing the needle a little bit higher each day, each month, each year, however you want to look at it?
I think it's based on the person, and I'm not going to knock anyone that works, for a corporation or whatever the structure is, or has been in the same role for, 20 years. Everybody has their own kind of what they want to do, and I'm not going to knock that my direction is the right one versus somebody's the wrong one. But being in digital marketing, it's a field where you need to keep learning. So it's not like construction where, you learn how to hammer a nail, and you're always going to do, hammering a nail a certain way unless you start getting into like AI and robotics, and you're going to have robots building houses, which will probably happen at one point or another. But with digital marketing, you always have to keep learning and always have to keep redefining. So even stuff with this, this is, a voice medium. Voice is going to keep getting extremely powerful. Voice search, voice in terms of home assistance. So moving into digital marketing, advertising, optimizing for Alexa, Google Home, optimizing and marketing podcasts, promoting podcasts, and just kind of growing in that sense. So, I mean, I made the decision to start a podcast myself. I always wanted to do it, even in the early days where I think Joe Rogan was doing it in, I think, 2011 or 2012. And like all these
Mm-hmm.
people were saying he's crazy. Howard Stern would make fun of it. And then now the dude is like one of the most successful. I mean, he has 5 to 6 million followers on YouTube. He's getting 1 million, 2 million views for like the live version of it. And then the downloads are crazy as well. So I think just sharing my expertise for the first year, my podcast was me sharing my, personal take on motivation, sharing things businesses and brands can do. So tactical strategies, not only just like the top level. Well, you should just be, doing social media. What should you be doing social media? If you're a pharmaceutical company, a legal company, a B2B, B2C, just giving tactical information, sharing things in terms of personal. So my family, my friends, my journey as a foster parent, some of the trials and tribulations dealing with the state and the, Division of Child Services. And then I thought, let me incorporate other people's stories into it. And I think that's like a new passion. I mean, I've really been interested in it. I've done, since I switched kind of that format, I've done about 14, 15 interviews of people, of varying professions and walks of life. And just even going back and listening to them and kind of relearning them and learning about those people again. It's like, it's just really cool. And I think I like networking, and I do a lot of networking in terms of people within digital marketing and bouncing ideas off one another. So surrounding yourself with people within the industry you're in to kind of bounce ideas and keep, that knowledge base fresh. And then also finding a mentor, finding people that, you just enjoy their company. They can be hungry and focus on success as well, but doing other things. So I think it's dependent on the person, but the drive for knowledge and not being stagnant, because if you become complacent and stagnant, I think like you start slowly dying inside and like losing the drive to push on and persevere and do other things. So I think in that sense, I'm never going to be content. Obviously, there's a lot of people like founders of companies. They found one company, they'll sell it or do whatever, and then it's like contagious. They start doing it for other companies and other companies. So I don't think my level of success is a stationary destination. It's, the success is along the journey. And I think regardless of, if I sell a company, if I acquire a company, if I build a company and I end up selling it, or it acquired in one way or another or something, some successful exit, I'm still going to do that again. I'm not going to, buy a beach house and sit on the beach and just, just relax for the rest of my life. I constantly have to be in a state of motion, and I'm always thinking, regardless if it's my downtime or vacation. So I think you have to be driven as an individual to do so.
Absolutely. And so the last question that I wanted to ask you, and you did drop a really good nugget earlier in regards to this, but I want to just kind of see if you have anything else that you would like to add to it. What would you say to someone who is sitting on the sidelines? They want to do something, whether it be, starting a podcast or starting a fitness journey or starting a company, building a website, whatever the case may be, but they haven't started yet. They're nervous about starting. I'm sure if you think back to what it was like to start your website for the first time, you know exactly what that feels like. So as someone who has now done it and had the success, what can you say to them to give them that little push?
I think you don't have to jump in all the way, like all in right away. You can kind of like get your feet wet, as I guess the saying goes. So you can still be doing whatever you're doing, and then just trying slowly. You're trying things. Fitness wise, people that don't work out, or let's say are overweight or not happy with their self-image or their body, they don't have to go like all out. 2-3 hours in the gym. All right, start with you go to the store. Let's park as far as you can, and have that as an extra few minutes of walking, or go outside your office or your house and walk a few days. Get the lightest weights. Start kind of getting some kind of muscle memory and resistance in that sense. So starting from something is better than not doing anything at all, regardless of how small that starter changes.
Well, I want to say, Roman, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and sharing your story with me and with the listeners. I really enjoyed hanging out with you here on the podcast, and I just want to give you an opportunity to add anything else that you would like to add to the show, or share your social media handles and areas where people can get connected with you.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate you having me on. So the company is Novazor Digital. That's my digital marketing agency. My full name is Roman Prokopchuk. The last name's a little intimidating, but you say it how it's pronounced. So anywhere in social, I work directly with a company called Cubic Consulting. So any big businesses that need kind of demand planning, financial planning, that kind of stuff. And then my podcast is called the Digital Savage Experience Podcast. If you're into motivation, stuff about marketing, family, tech, business, feel free to check it out.
And I actually, now that I'm looking at it, yes, I can see that. Prokopchuk.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's 10 letters, so people were like, "Oh, well, how do I handle this?" Well, it's Prokopchuk, nothing like crazy. So
yeah, no, actually, it's really funny that you say that, because looking down at it, when I first got connected with you, I was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna have to ask him how to pronounce that before I do the intros for the podcast." But now that you just said it, and you're like, "Nope, it's said exactly how it looks," like. Totally makes sense. Well, Roman, thank you so much for coming on the podcast again. Like I said, I really appreciate it. And I hope that you have a fantastic afternoon and whatever it is that you're going to get into. And I look forward to keeping up with you.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. That is my conversation with Roman Prokopchuk. I would love for you to take a minute and reach out to Roman. Leave a comment on his Instagram, send him a direct message, let him know that you heard this episode here on the podcast, and let him know what you thought. I really appreciate Roman taking the time to sit down and chat with me, and I really appreciate you, the listener, taking a minute to hang out with us and listen to Roman's story. I really enjoy sitting down with people, getting to know them better, or even meeting them for the first time, and sharing their stories with you here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. And I would not be able to do that without your support. So I thank you very much for enabling me to do that, and it's something that I really, really enjoy. So thank you so much for your support, and thank you for coming and hanging out with us for today, and I really look forward to bringing you another amazing story again next week.